The girl blew out a match, holding a plate with a small cake in her hands. Bringing the cake closer, she wished Valerie a happy birthday with a smile. She sat alone in the middle of the big hall, thinking that she was trying to survive all the time, and today she turned 19 years old. She looked out the window, thinking that she had always been alone and that even the people outside were hoping for her quick death. She remembered becoming a former princess and listening with dread as she sat on the floor being moved to MacLeod Castle. Others then said that this was a very mild punishment and that she should be executed in the same way as her mother, because Valerie is the daughter of the one who tried to poison the Empress. People discussed that then the Empress had lost her grandson and that the punishment for such a crime was really too lenient. Everyone begged His Majesty to change the order, but he ordered everyone to shut up and said that anyone who opened their mouth about the punishment would go with the princess to the castle. She was young, almost a child, hearing what her stepbrother was saying. She understood that the ice castle was the same as death, but at least not execution. It was a frozen castle on top of a mountain that was always covered in snow and eternal cold, huge and empty. 500 years ago, a huge monster caused the Green Mountain to freeze. The emperor of that time, named Loxar, killed a dragon that possessed ice magic. As his sword crippled the dragon's heart, the power that the dragon's heart had been holding back burst forth. At the same moment, not only the whole mountain froze, but also all the villages that were nearby. Among the people there were a lot of victims. The girl remembered that she had found the crystal by absorbing the power of the ice dragon, as if one imprisonment was not enough for her life. Valerie looked out the window, outside which, as usual, it was snowing, and thought that she would never again feel a drop of warmth in her life, and God, if he loved people, would not allow such a thing. The former princess wept, thinking that people could not live without warmth, and despite the expectations of others, she survived and celebrated her 19th birthday today. She released her ice power that cut through her body. Valerie lay in a pool of her own blood and thought about the fact that she was now warm. Lying there, she asked the god for only one thing, to allow her to be born in the next life in a place not as cold as this. She remembered the past, her mother, who shouted at her and said that Valerie was of no use. The princess thought, why this particular moment? She shouted, waving something that people like her should not be born. The girl sat on the floor and thought about why exactly this memory appeared now. The mother screamed, saying that every time she sees her daughter she walks as if in the very centre of hell. She remembered the portrait of her mother, who was a former empress, but even then she was not satisfied with her title. Valerie remembered that the mother was only getting worse, and she took out all her anger on the little child that she was. She remembered how, as a child, she thought she cried and kept silent, because she thought she was to blame for everything her mother said. Above her stood the image of a mother asking if her daughter was still thinking about something of her own. The next moment Valerie fell to the floor because her mother hit her, telling her that even someone like her considered the Empress worthless. After the blow, the girl looked at her hands and wondered why she was in pain, because she was dead. She wondered if she had gone back in time with ice magic. The mother meanwhile said that now even scum like her daughter looks down on her and considers her worthless. Her half-brother was walking around the palace and turned in surprise. The maid brought a very beautiful casket with a horse on a pillow, saying that it was a gift from the emperor. The mother asked if the casket was really Millard's, and the maid informed her that it was, and that it was a gift from His Majesty for the princess. The mother smiled broadly, saying that the emperor had finally lost his mind and that this was very good news. Valerie looked at her gift, which the maid had placed on the table. At night, while she did not see her mother, she came and wanted to take the box to play. The girl, having opened the music box, listened to the music without taking her eyes off it while the music was playing. And now Valerie sat in front of the broken casket and couldn't take her eyes off it while her mother ordered her not to go out until her bruises healed. Already at the threshold, the mother turned and told her not to go beyond the threshold, although she would not be able to, even if she wanted to. Valerie ran out of the room, wondering why she had put up with it then and why she was putting up with it now. The next moment the mother fell to the floor, hitting her back as the princess ran past her. Hearing her mother command to grab her, Valerie quickly ran on to escape her and the maids. She ran despite the pain in her leg and tried to think of where to run. She remembered the Emperor and his gift, because when she lived in the castle on the snowy mountain, it was he who provided her with everything she needed. Thinking that he would help her even now, while she turned and ran through the corridors. The two maids grabbed her, telling her she was caught, and Valerie's eyes bulged in outrage. One said that even in this state she was running too fast, and the other with a smile asked Her Highness to keep her dignity. As soon as she started screaming, asking for someone to help, her mouth was quickly covered. One of them leaned over and whispered that if she was obedient, Her Majesty the Empress would forgive her behaviour. Valerie thought about what she should do, because if she was taken away now, it would be the end of her life. She thought about freezing them, but then dismissed the idea because she didn't want to become a monster, even though she had his power. Valerie tried to break free and call for help, but the maids covered her mouth, and one of them impatiently told them to go as fast as possible. The blonde boy's brother was standing around the corner watching what was happening. Thinking that he would be able to help her, Valerie resisted and was able to ask him for help while the maids covered her mouth. She turned, looking at the boy and mentally begging him to understand that something was wrong and tell his father. The girl's mother listened to the report, questioning whether they really did not see anyone while they were catching the princess. She was pleased to say that it didn't matter if anyone poked their nose in, because nothing would get to Millard anyway. The mother turned and with anger and hatred told Valeria that all her attempts were useless. The girl was shaking with fear, listening to the words of her mother, who was unhappy that her daughter had gained courage. Taking her daughter by the head, the mother bent down and said that she should be reminded of her place. But they were interrupted. The mother turned around, gritting her teeth angrily, when she heard that the Imperial Knights were outside. She ordered the room to be quickly cleaned, saying that the maids had lied that no one had seen them. Valerie, meanwhile, sat completely immobilized with her mouth taped shut so she wouldn't make a single squeak. Mother telling her to sit still and pretend she was dead and didn't make a sound. Imperial soldiers appeared in the castle, standing in the hall and waiting. In front of everyone stood Bruno Rinaumann. He was their captain. He said that he was glad to see the former Empress, Alicia, and said that he saw that they were doing well. She asked why the knights had come to her castle, and Bruno replied that His Majesty had ordered to check on Her Highness the Princess. Mother said with a smile that she could not remember when she and the Emperor had become so close that he would pay her visits. But Bruno Rinaumann stopped smiling, saying that he was simply following His Majesty's order. He did not like what the former Empress said. Turning to leave, she said she understood his intentions, but now was not the time, and told him to tell her that the princess had gone to bed after her etiquette lesson. He bowed his head, asking in a commanding voice if Alicia really wanted to obey the order. She turned around, answering in the same tone that everything was as she said. She asked if the captain really thought that he would wake up the princess so that she would show herself to the soldiers. They watched in amazement as the former empress cried out, saying that she was about the order and that the princess was asleep. She began to accuse everyone of disobeying her just because she was a former empress. She roared viciously in the soldiers' faces, saying that she refused to show them her child until the emperor appeared in person. Bruno Rinaumann bowed, apologizing for troubling her. Valerie begged them not to go, thinking that if they left now, she would again. But everything went wrong. On the threshold stood His Majesty the Emperor, whom Alicia wanted to see so much. Bruno bowed before the Emperor, apologizing because the princess... But he interrupted the captain and said that that's why he came personally, that he was expecting something like this. Alicia began to tell him why he should waste his time on them, and if he wanted to see the princess, he could do it on another day. But he said only one word. No. He said that he came to see his younger sister and what other reasons he needed for the visit. While he asked where Valerie was, she cried in the closet, only able to hear what was happening in the hallway. Alicia smiled, saying that the princess would be surprised because the emperor hardly communicates with her so often. With a bored look, the emperor said that he was informed that the only princess of the empire was being dragged somewhere against her will by her own maid. The girl's mother rolled her eyes at her daughter's half-brother, wondering what to do next. And then she smiled widely, standing next to the maid, and said that this could not happen. All the maids standing in front of the Emperor lied that they had never even heard of such a thing. His Majesty smiled, amused by what he saw, and said that he did not think that all the maids of this palace were in a conspiracy. Alicia gritted her teeth as she watched as the soldiers went to find the princess and search the palace as ordered by the Emperor. She shrieked that this was too much even for the Emperor, and how could such a fuss be made just because of the quality of the rumour? Crown Prince Erlonk appeared in front of her, which attracted the Emperor's attention. He began to say that these were not rumours. Placing his hand over his heart to show that he was not lying, he said that he had seen it with his own eyes and reported it. Alicia thought maliciously why the Crown Prince needed to see them. The Emperor was displeased, saying that he would figure it out himself, and told him to wait. Watching the small quarrel, Alicia thought about how the little heathen dared to report, and even said that he would stay until the end. The Emperor told Alicia to stop playing her role, confess, and bring Valerie as soon as possible. When he heard that his mother did not know where his sister was, the Emperor scolded her, telling her to stop lying. Alicia began to cry, saying that she would not say anything, and also asked why they were with her like this. Erlance interrupted her and poked a finger at the cupboard behind her, telling her to open it. Fear appeared on Alicia's face. After opening the closet, Crown Prince Erlance saw Valerie tied up, whose mouth was even taped shut so that she wouldn't make a sound. Smiling and blushing a little, the Crown Prince greeted her. He told her not to be afraid anymore, because he had come to save her. Little by little, the boy untied all the knots on her hands, asking her to be patient if it hurts. Looking at her brother the Emperor, Valerie thought that they had finally met and there was no more hesitation. The girl fell on the floor and began to beg His Majesty to save her. She begged, saying that she would do anything he wanted, if only he would save her. Her mother shouted behind her, asking her how to understand it. The Emperor, saying that everything was clear to him, ordered the arrest of the former Empress, as well as her henchmen of the maids, for the cruel treatment of the princess. Valerie stood and watched as the soldiers arrested her mother while she begged them not to. The girl blushed as she looked at her brother as Erlance took her hand for support. The young Emperor smiled and told the children to follow him, and his soldiers would do the rest. Alicia started shouting that everything is unfair and asking why everyone hates her so much, and whether her punishment is not enough already. She started yelling at Valerie, calling her worthless, but she didn't finish because the captain covered her mouth so she would stop crying. Standing over her, the Emperor said that now her true face appeared because she stopped following with her tongue. He ordered an inquiry into previous incidents. Turning back to the children, the Emperor smiled and said that they must be shocked and that they should all get out of here as soon as possible. When he reached to touch her hair, Valerie ducked, thinking she was about to be spanked. The older brother apologized, saying that he hadn't thought about her reaction while the girl looked at him in disbelief. He threw his jacket over his sister's shoulders and touched them with a gentle gesture, saying that he would not hurt her. Sitting down so as to be on the same level with her, the Emperor said that it must be difficult for her to walk in her condition, and asked if she would allow him to carry her in his arms. When she said that she did not mind, the brother took the girl in his arms with a smile. She blushed, because no one had ever carried her in their arms. Erlance smiled sweetly and told her to go to Fernand Palace. As they made their way out, the Emperor said he admired Erlance's courage, but they would have to talk about his behaviour, to which the boy began to protest. The girl thought about the fact that she received help, but all this warmth is so unfamiliar to her, because she grew up in a cold palace. While she asked herself if it was not a dream, and squeezed the Emperor's shoulder a little harder, Erlance, seeing this, worriedly asked if she was in pain. Saying she was fine, Valerie closed her eyes and began to cry, clinging tighter to her older brother as he carried her free. The Emperor stood in front of the castle with both children in his arms. Erlance also asked for his arms. Everyone who met the Emperor in the palace began to greet him, saying that they were glad to see him, the son of the Empire. Senior butler Kyle squinted at the girl in the Emperor's arms, visibly displeased by her presence. He asked whether to call the doctor. Telling him to examine Valerie, he asked where the Empress was. After this question, The girl opened her eyes because she was afraid. As he handed out the instructions, the Emperor turned to one of the handmaidens and said he trusted Valerie in her hands. Rael smiled sweetly and said she would do her best. Taking a slightly frightened Valerie into her arms, Rael greeted Her Highness and said they would be leaving together. But as they started to leave, Erland started to get cranky and started saying what he wanted with her. The Emperor grimaced but agreed. With a smile, the Emperor told the boy to be careful, and he himself thought that it would be difficult to get used to such a relationship between these two. He thought, as he and Rael happily walked away, that they were two children, but in reality one of them was his nephew, and the other was his aunt. The Emperor said that the palace would be restless for the first time, and Kyle asked if it was related to the former Empress. Kyle listened to what the Emperor was thinking and what actually happened, and said he would do as His Majesty ordered. There were two women sitting in the living room, and both greeted the Emperor, and the blonde even smiled, saying that he had finally returned. It was Karina and Lila. The Emperor's wife asked with fear if anything had happened, because she could not find Erlance anywhere. Sitting down in front of them, the Emperor said that he needed to discuss something with his mother and wife. At the same time, Rael helped Valerie wash and change her clothes, while the girl looked in the mirror. She wondered if she was about 9 now as she looked at herself in the mirror. She remembered that she turned on the casket every night, listened to its melody and dreamed that she had warmth and a family. Blushing with shame, she looked down. Erlands was looking at her wounds on her arms and legs. When Valerie apologized, the Crown Prince asked her in surprise if she had done something wrong. She clutched her dress, saying that he had seen a lot he shouldn't have, and he must be shocked. The boy said, offended, that she did not need to apologize and that she would rather thank him. Having told about the fact that his mother called him a naughty but good son, the grey-haired Erland said that this was exactly why he wanted to hear words of thanks. Valerie, becoming even more confused, told the boy that she was very grateful for the fact that he helped her. The boy smiled happily, saying that it was much better, and Valerie thought that if the light became a person, it would definitely be Erlance. Marla thought for a few seconds, thinking about what it's like to be grateful. They were both looking at the door when there was a knock on it. It was Imperial Dr. Kanna Rainan. The Crown Prince smiled while the girl was surprised. A brunette entered the room, immediately looking at her new patient. She bowed, greeting their highnesses the Crown Prince and Princess. But while the boy was greeting, the girl thought that it was good luck to see one of the best doctors in the Empire. In a past life, Kanna saved the Empress poisoned by Alicia, but she was specific and only responded to the Emperor's requests. Rainan said she was sorry, but the Crown Prince had to go. The boy began to argue, asking why. When the maid led Erlance out, he turned and told Kanna not to insult the girl. When everyone left, the doctor began to examine Valerie, carefully and without haste. Kanna thought that a normal child would have lashed out and cried in pain while she treated the wounds, but the girl just endured. She thought that Valerie must have handled everything like this before. After the girl asked if it was necessary to show the scars under the clothes, Kanna even gritted her teeth, glaring at her in surprise. Valerie said that she only assumed that it was necessary to examine her whole body, because then the doctor would not ask the Crown Prince to leave. The girl began to undress, thinking that she should show the scars from her life in the Ronan Palace, because it was better for her future. Seeing that her hands were shaking while the girl undressed, the doctor put her hands on her to calm her down. She asked if she could help Valerie as she looked at Kanna with huge childish eyes. The girl allowed. After the examination, the doctor wrote a conclusion, saying in it that the princess was regularly subjected to violence during her life in the Ronan Palace. As soon as the doctor left, Erlance flew into the room and immediately took Valerie's hands while the maid praised Her Highness. Erlance asked if Kanna had hurt her while the doctor looked patiently at the Crown Prince. The boy looked at her in surprise when the girl said that thanks to him she was not in pain. He happily said that he was very glad that he could help, and said that he should go to his father now. They entered the room where the adults were. The maids bowed to both of them, and the girl herself thought about the difficult atmosphere. Valerie sat down on the sofa and clenched her fists, worried about what the Empress would say. She wondered if they believed her. The Emperor addressed Valerie, saying that they had read the note sent by the Imperial physician. He thanked her for being so brave, because it must not have been easy for her. While her husband said that they needed proof to take the title away from Alicia, his wife Layla looked at the girl with pity. She smiled sweetly, and turning to Valerie, said that they had gathered here to listen to her story. Valerie visibly frowned, looking at the adults, and heard how she was asked to tell exactly what was happening in the palace. While she was talking, Erlands was sitting next to her, supporting her. Valerie said that she no longer wanted to live the way she lived, and therefore tried to escape. The Emperor clenched his teeth in anger at Alicia, asking her sister why she never asked for help. But he later corrected himself, saying that this was not the question, because they should have guessed and seen everything for themselves. She remembered her mother saying that no one would help her, not even His Majesty, because she was the daughter of his sworn enemy. Valerie told about what her mother had said, and under the cry of the Empress, she said that this is why she did not ask for help, because she was right. She is the daughter of the Emperor's enemy. The elder Empress, her brother's mother, opened her eyes in prayer to the Lord after hearing all this. The Emperor lowered his eyes, clenching his fists. He said that he did not suspect anything when he was told that Alicia was raising her with love. The girl with tears in her eyes looked at her older brother, who apologized to her for not noticing earlier. Yelling, Erlands rushed to her, hugging her. While she sat in amazement, the boy said that she was not a monster, only those who harmed her were monsters. Valerie began to shake with emotion, and new tears appeared in her eyes, while her nephew told her that now she would not be hurt. She hugged the boy tightly in return and began to sob, not holding back her emotions. The young Empress approached the girl with a smile and said that her son was right, and that now everything would be fine. The Emperor's mother said with a displeased face that it was not necessary to show condescension to Alicia. The Emperor said that he agreed with his mother's words, and said that a punishment must be chosen. Meanwhile, the children, while the adults were talking, fell asleep in each other's arms. After some time, the girl woke up, not understanding where she was. Beside her, Erlands also began to wake up, straining from a sweet sleep. She asked where they were, and the boy replied that it was his father's room. When the boy was still yawning, the girl touched his cheek and said that his eyes were a little swollen. And then they both started laughing because both of their eyes were swollen shut. Laughing, the girl thought about the fact that she had woken up from a long winter, feeling like the weather outside the window, spring. Meanwhile, Bruno Rinoman angrily told the girls behind the bars to shut up. One of them asked to let her go. She sobbed and assured that she was innocent and that she was only doing what she was asked to do. All this was observed by the Emperor, standing next to the captain of the guard. Standing in front of the cell in which Alicia sat, he asked her if she had anything to say, because all the maids spoke of her cruelty. Everyone started gossiping very quickly about the fact that Alicia was bullying everyone, and this news spread even faster outside the palace. The Emperor thought that they would need a very good reason to take away the title of Empress, but he was more surprised by Valerie's reaction to the whole situation. He smiled widely when he heard that Valerie had come to him as he had requested. He saw that his son was next to her. While Erlands was smiling broadly at his father, asking if he really couldn't be near Valerie, she stood and looked at her older brother. The girl sat down on a chair while the Emperor asked her to listen to what he was going to tell her. He, folding his hands, was visibly nervous about his sister's reaction, but he said directly that he was going to sentence Alicia Beloff to death. Valerie widened her eyes at him, remembering what happened in her past life. The sentence was the same. The sentence of the mother, who in a past life poisoned Empress Karina, the mother of Valerie's brother, and then his wife, was now due to Valerie herself. The Emperor said that the sister should not think that her mother would die because of her, because before that, she had already wanted to poison his mother, Empress Karina. He said that Alicia's crime had consequences, and that she had only herself to blame for her death. Valerie looked at her brother in surprise, thinking that he really cared so that she would not blame herself. Clutching her dress, the girl staggered at first, but then said she was fine. The Emperor also said after a while that the execution would take place in 2 days, and also that she no longer has a title and is currently in a dungeon. She asked if her mother had admitted that she had been abusing her, and when she heard that she had not, she simply said that she understood. The man said that not only her mother was exposed, but also those who helped her. The maids are trying to get softened, so they tell how everything was, and everything coincides with her words. Saying that she would do according to his orders, the girl thanked His Majesty for helping her and bowed. The Emperor told the sister to raise her head because he had done what he had to do. Looking at his sister and son, he thought that they were the same age, but Valerie appeared to be much older. And then they both rolled their eyes when the Emperor said that Erlans should call Valerie aunt, because she was his aunt and his father's sister, even though they were the same age. Valerie was surprised given the family status when her brother called her sister, and also the boy's aunt. Erlans, blushing a little, said that he wanted to call the girl by her name. Hearing that he had to ask permission from Valeria, he turned and with a bright gleam in his eyes asked if she would mind. He asked her to call him by his first name because no one called him that, only by his title, and she is one of the few who can say his name. Valerie even closed her eyes, giving up and saying that anything is possible for Erlans. When the son asked if he could now, the Emperor laughed into his fist, saying that now he could. He was incredibly happy about this situation. And then, to Valerie's complete surprise, her nephew rushed to her and hugged her tightly, saying that he was very happy. 2 days later, when Alicia was to be executed, the children were in the room reading. And if Erlans was cheerful, Valerie kept looking out the window and thinking about her mother. She recalled that the butler had said that the Emperor had forbidden the children to leave the palace when they wanted to go outside to play. The girl exhaled loudly, attracting the attention of the boy, who took his eyes off the book and was now looking at her. She looked at him in surprise because he told her to follow him, because she really wanted to look at the woman who called herself her mother. With a smile, he said that although they were not allowed to approach the place of execution, he knew a detour. Valerie put her hand in the hand of the Crown Prince and thought that they would think about the consequences of everything later. They peeked through the door to seize the moment and slip out of the palace, first Erlans, and then Valerie. Just as they were about to leave, Bruno Rinalman appeared behind them and said, "Their Highnesses cannot leave the palace." And while the girl looked in surprise at the right hand of the Emperor, Erlans said that he knew that Sir Bruno would be here. He only suspiciously asked if he should be somewhere else. With a sweet smile, the little boy asked the guard to lead them to the palace gate. Sir Bruno widened his eyes, looking at the Crown Prince in fear. When he said he couldn't do it, Erlans said matter-of-factly with a smile that it wasn't a disinterested request. After all, he himself taught that everything has its price. The little one smiled contentedly, saying that 6 months ago, the Emperor's favourite vase was not broken by Erlans's mother, but by him. Bruno Rinalman turned white when he heard the Crown Prince's words. He was very afraid that the Emperor would find out about it. He asked how His Highness knew this, and he was pleased to say that he heard it when he spoke to his mother about it. Sir Bruno was in despair, mentioning that the Emperor and his son were very similar and giving him a huge headache. Valerie smiled sweetly, folded her hands in a pleading gesture, and told Sir Bruno that they would be gone soon, and no one would even notice they were gone. He looked at the princess and thought that she was asking for this so desperately. He even shook his head, remembering his visit to Alicia in the cell and understanding why the girl wanted to see her mother. Both sat on Bruno's arms as he walked into the square. Everyone around was whispering because children were not allowed to leave the palace. The little one was pleased to say that his secret would remain with him, and Sir Bruno was doomed to thank him for it. They watched as the 2nd Division went with the prisoners, who were already being led to the square. Sir Bruno looked frightened at the Emperor, who asked the children what the two of them were doing here, while they looked at him. The Emperor said with a smile that he had definitely ordered them not to leave the palace. He asked Sir Bruno to explain his behaviour. 7 sweats broke out from that, while he tried to come up with an excuse for how the children ended up in the square. The others saw the Emperor and started saluting the Sun Empire, distracting them from their conversation. Alicia, not believing her ears, turned her head to see the Emperor with her own eyes. He looked at Alicia with hatred, covering Valerie with himself when she started to scream. The girl with huge eyes listened to her mother, who called her an ungrateful girl. She was visibly embarrassed. Alicia started screaming as she broke free from the soldier's grasp, asking her daughter if she really thought those people would love her after betraying her own mother. Looking directly at her daughter, she told her that she had to get rid of such a monster. Valerie looked in surprise at her imprisoned mother being led to the scaffold, and understood that she was no longer afraid of these threats. The Emperor could feel the girl hiding more behind him, tightly clutching his jacket. Irritated, he said that was why he didn't want them to see each other at all. The Emperor shouted at the soldiers, ordering them to take Alicia as far away from the children as possible. Alicia broke free from the hands of one of the soldiers, and while the others tried to pull her away from the children, she called her daughter while sitting on the asphalt. She screamed, calling her daughter a fool, and asking if she really thought that the Imperial family would protect her forever. She said that it would be thrown away as soon as it lost its value. And then the mother calmed down and said with a smile that this is how she would die. After gagging Alicia, Sir Bruno Rinaman angrily asked if the guards had forgotten how to gag criminally insane. Erlands gently told Valerie not to take her mother's words to heart. Holding the boy's hand, she looked at her mother's back and said that her words would no longer reach Valerie. She said goodbye to her mother. The girl stood and looked at the place where she disappeared little by little, until she was led somewhere. Feeling the Emperor's hand, Valerie thought that all negative emotions were disappearing together with her mother. The Emperor glumly said that the Templar should return to his studies, and Bruno bowed, saying that he would pass it on to Sir Horth. Turning his head to him, the Emperor was dissatisfied with his work, so he said that Bruno was no exception. The little ones were talking about whether everything would be all right, but Erlantz thought that his father was lenient with Sir Bruno. The children returned to the Emperor, who said that now was not the time to think about others, because he was waiting for their excuses. Valerie closed her eyes, waiting for the Emperor's anger that they had fled the palace. But he just stroked her hair, showing that he wasn't angry. Going away, the Emperor ordered Bruno to go with the children to the palace and wait for him there. Valerie looked at her half-brother's back in surprise, touching her hair where his hand had been recently. She could not believe what had just happened. Erlantz, when they were already in the palace and brought them goodies, told Valerie to try the cookies because they were incredibly tasty. As she ate, she thought about how she couldn't believe how things were turning out, and that she was back from the dead and living a better version of her life. Valerie turned her head to the boy in surprise when she felt his hand touch hers, as she tightened her grip on her dress. The boy looked at her and asked what happened and whether she thought about the recent events. She squeezed the dress even tighter, telling him not to worry because it just seems like some kind of dream. The Crown Prince looked at her resolutely and told her to remember that they were family and that he loved her very much. He told her with a smile not to worry, because what she was thinking about would never happen. Valerie asked if he was sure that he wanted her to become his family, but he replied with a smile that it was not a question at all, because they were born as a family. When she cried, the boy asked if she didn't like it, but Valerie said with a smile that she was just very happy with his words. Kyle appeared in the room, bowed to their highnesses, and asked if they had a good rest. The butler said he had a few questions for Sir Bruno, and he replied that he would be fine now. While munching on sweets, the children discussed what adults can talk about. Erland said that most likely it was about execution. Returning, Sir Bruno smiled and addressed the children by their titles. He said that the process of Alicia's execution was completed, and the Emperor would soon return to the palace. Valerie told Bruno that she was glad that everything ended well, but she thought that it did not seem to be the end. The girl turned to Sir Bruno Reinaumann, saying that she had a question for him. He immediately sat down, getting down on one knee to be with the princess of the same level. He told her not to apologize for what she wanted to ask, but to simply address him by name. The knight was smiling. Bruno smiled broadly and said that it was a fair deal and that the children would now keep his secret. Valerie said with a sweet smile that she wouldn't even stutter about it. She thanked him again for what he had done. He said that the Emperor would return soon and that he himself would most likely be lugging sacks and living in the training ground, but these two... Erland said that Valerie should not worry and that he would not let him lay a finger on her. but she said that she was ready to suffer the punishment because the two of them risked for her sake. When the Crown Prince began to argue, she said that she would not let anyone take the blame for anything. Sir Bruno watched the little one agree on something. Valerie squealed with joy, asking Erlunk if he was serious, and he only smiled contentedly and said that only she could handle this. The Crown Prince winked at her, saying that if she did as he said, his father wouldn't punish Valerie too much. And while Bruno was confused, and Valerie did not believe in the plan, Erlens was satisfied and happy with his own plan. The children were confused when they saw the maid, who said that His Majesty was waiting for them both. He stood and looked at the children who came to his office with the maid. He was visibly angry, telling Valerie to at least try to apologize for her behavior. Valerie looked at her sweet-faced stepsister, arms folded in front of her, while he smiled broadly in the background. She looked guiltily at the Emperor and said she just wanted to see her mother one last time. The Emperor looked at his sister and listened calmly, perfectly understanding the girl. Valerie said that she so wanted to understand to the end that she was finally freed from her cruelty and influence. Erlans gave a thumbs up with a smile, thinking that now was just the perfect time for their plan. Valerie folded her hands in prayer and asked her half-brother if he would punish her. The girl's body began to shake from tension. She was looking at the Emperor and could not even move from her place. The Emperor's face was visibly tense and displeased. He remained silent while looking at Valerie. When they heard that the Emperor would not punish the girl, he and Erlans were visibly happy. Even Sir Bruno was smiling with relief. But then the girl's smile faded when her brother said that he would not scold her, but she would definitely be punished. The Emperor put his hand on the girl's head and stroked her hair until she was bent over. She looked surprised at her brother, who said her punishment was his touching her head without warning, so she would get used to it. With a sweet smile, the Emperor asked if she was still afraid of touch, but said that he did not force her. But Valerie looked at the Emperor with huge sweet eyes and said that she liked everything. When he released the children, Bruno was about to leave as well, but he began to drool when the Emperor reminded him that he had only released the children. He asked Rinneman if there was something they needed to discuss, and asked when Bruno had managed to be so insolent. Turning and smiling awkwardly, Bruno looked at the Emperor. He appeared brave in front of Valerie, but in reality it was not like that. Under the heavy gaze of the Emperor, he bowed his head. Bruno was the commander of the knights and seemed old and tired. He thought that he definitely did not want to go to the training ground. Bruno smiled as he looked at His Majesty. He made huge cute eyes, copying Valerie, and asked if the Emperor was going to punish him. The Emperor began to say that Bruno was an adult and that he should have a conscience, because he almost had a fit when he saw his behavior. Standing there, Bruno listened to the order that he had to get the sandbags and go to the playground immediately. He was visibly confused by this. Valerie stood by the window and thought about her mother's death. The whole palace was buzzing about it, and Sir Bruno came back that day with a very strange expression on his face. She had been stoned before being hanged. Remembering the image of Empress Karina, she remembered the mother against whom the people rose up after the poisoning of Karina. After all, she was generous and kind, just like her late husband, the Emperor. Valerie thought that this time things were very different from the past life, especially since people did it all for her, Valerie. She drew herself near the people, remembering that this time they revealed the truth about the mother before the poisoning of Layla, so people sympathized with her. But she thought that all this was not important, because everything would change exactly at the moment when people would learn about her abilities. Looking out the window at the people, Valerie thought they were afraid of her freezing powers and that she wouldn't get out of the water dry if they found out. She looked at the room where she lived and understood that the Emperor and his wife clearly cared for her because they got completely new things for her, leaving the old ones in Ronan Palace. With sad eyes, Valerie looked at things and asked herself if she was not too used to the fact that she had a family. She wrapped her arms around herself, thinking that this is why she felt guilty for hiding her abilities from the Emperor and family, because they cared so much for her. She looked sadly at her hands, remembering that the Emperor had given her a casket, provided from MacLeod Palace. and that it was only thanks to him that she did not die in those cold lands. Closing her eyes, Valerie put her hand to her heart and decided. She would tell the Emperor everything in honor of his attitude towards her and face all the consequences. Silently eating breakfast, Valerie thought that her abilities might be of use to the Emperor. The girl was visibly worried, wondering exactly how to help the Emperor, until Erlance could understand what Valerie was thinking and asked if anything had happened to her while he was gone. She smiled broadly, saying that she was fine, but thought to herself that the boy was good at noticing every detail. After they ate, the children said goodbye to each other, saying that they would see each other after school. Walking with the maid to her place, Valerie thought about the fact that Erlance was studying and she also needed to brush up on her skills and knowledge of abilities. She looked at the street, listening to the conversation of the young maids. At that time, the maids discussed that their salaries would not allow them to enjoy ice chips in the summer. The girl was smiling while her maid asked if something was bothering her, because she suddenly stopped. She figured out how to be useful and make her not be afraid of herself. Valerie asked the maids with a smile if she could do everything herself. Both were surprised and confused, each thinking about what she had done wrong. The girl was scared, thinking why exactly they were reacting like that, because she asked herself because she wanted to practice. With a sweet smile, Rael told Her Highness that she could contact them if she felt any inconvenience. She tried to say the right thing and was afraid to offend her. Therefore she said that she has already grown up and wants to wash herself. The three maids were amazed at what she said. One of the girls even shed a tear. Standing alone in the bathroom, Valerie thought that even though she made up a stupid excuse, she was believed and left alone in the bathroom. She had already changed into her robe, saying that she would of course call when everyone had left, and said they would wait outside the door if needed. She finally released her power, which shot out from her hands in a beautiful blue flame. She tested her abilities and thought it was incredible that they remained the same, even though she had regressed by being reborn. Valerie was training because she wanted to show the Emperor that she could be useful and not dangerous, after telling the Emperor about her features. She watched as the water didn't fully turn into water, thinking that it was because she was younger that it was harder to control the ability. Valerie trained for days, thinking about the fact that it was necessary to master the ability, so that no one would ever think that it could be dangerous. She was glad that I could use my power again. Opening the bathroom door, she smiled sweetly at the maids. Valerie announced that she had already washed up, actually pouring plenty of hot water to mask the cold. The girls said she took her bathing very seriously while they helped her with her hair and grooming, while the princess herself said it was not bad. The maids were also in shock, asking whether she would wash herself today too, because it had already been 10 days since she started bathing on her own. When they went to prepare everything, one of the maids asked the others, maybe the princess was uncomfortable showing her wounds to others. With a cute expression on her face, Rael told the girls to give the girls some time. She asked everyone to be patient and understanding. Meanwhile, Valerie has been training with her powers, trying to regain full control over them. She concentrated and trained. When she finished training, the princess smiled and thought she was ready. She was in complete control of the ice and her own abilities. She bowed her head, thinking that she wouldn't want to do that, but she would have to use her ability if she suddenly had to flee the palace. As she opened the bathroom door to alert the maids, she thought only of the fact that she would not return to the snowy mountains for anything in the world. In the palace, the knights were on guard when Sir Bruno noticed an unusual visitor. Standing before him with a smile was Her Imperial Highness Princess Valerie. The head of the guard sat down, kneeling before the princess, and asked if she was here to see His Majesty. She awkwardly looked at the soldiers who were smiling broadly at her, and wondered why they were behaving like that. Valerie said the Emperor must be busy, but Bruno said he was just working on the paperwork. Turning his head towards the guard, Sir Bruno ordered Rex to inform His Majesty that Her Highness had arrived. Turning around, Rex went to inform the Emperor, and he wondered if the girl was afraid of him because he smiled at her. Valerie knocked quietly on the massive door of her stepbrother's office. Sorting through the documents and reading everything he had to sign, the Emperor said the guest could enter. Valerie awkwardly looked at the mountains of documents on the Emperor's desk and said that she could come later if he was busy, Glancing at the stack of papers waiting for him, he told Valerie not to even bother, and he could finish everything quickly. And then he smiled sweetly, saying that, moreover, he could not send his younger sister away when she had a conversation with him. As soon as he asked what she wanted to tell him, Valerie fell to her knees, saying that she wanted to ask him something. He gritted his teeth as he looked at his sister and asked her to get up from her knees. When she asked to be allowed to remain in the palace under his protection, the Emperor said with visible excitement that she had nothing to worry about if that was what she wanted to ask. She raised her head when she heard that he, as an elder brother, should give her protection and she would live in the palace. But she said that there was something else she would like to tell him about. Told that he might change his mind once he heard her words, Valerie tried to find the right words to talk about her abilities. She didn't look at her brother when she said she could freeze ice. Her hands were shaking, and she was afraid of his reaction. Valerie looked at the Emperor, not knowing what to do. Run away or wait, because he didn't say anything, only looked back. But then he said that now he understood why his words did not calm the girl down. He asked if Alicia knew about the powers, then looked pityingly at her sister, who said that even her mother didn't know about the powers. Valerie said that she could keep silent about it for the rest of her days, but she wanted to repay His Majesty's kindness and good treatment of her. The girl said that she would like to ask him for help one more time, although he had already done a lot for her. The Emperor said he would grant the request. Valerie looked at him in surprise, asking if he was seriously going to help her so easily. The Emperor folded his hands on his chest in displeasure and said that distrust was written on her face. He smiled, thinking the same way she did. It was dangerous to leave a man with an ability that had been the death of many citizens in the palace. But Valerie was shocked by what she heard next. He was sure that she was not the kind of person who would abuse her abilities and do harm. And then the Emperor said with confidence that if she wanted to cause harm, she would have done it long ago. He looked determinedly at his sister. He remembered the gagged girl he had seen in the palace then, and said that she would be the first to take revenge on Alicia. Valerie herself was covered in scars and bruises. Sitting down, the Emperor gave the girl his hand with a smile and said that he hoped his choice would not be wrong. The girl began to cry because the Emperor believed her. She did not think that everything would be like this, but her joy and gratitude knew no bounds. When he said that it was necessary not to apologize but to thank and took her sister's hand, Valerie thanked her, cringing with emotion. The Emperor smiled widely and thanked Valeria herself for her courage. And then he touched her hair again in an encouraging gesture, while the girl tried to get used to it. The Emperor asked what her skill level was as he crouched across from her, to be on the same level as her sister. Valerie shared that she has full control over her abilities because she trained. She said readily that she was ready to show, but it was necessary to go to such a place where no traces would be visible. The Emperor said they could go to the bathroom, which was next to the study. While her brother was the first to leave, the girl thought with embarrassment and surprise about how busy he must be to have a bathroom next to his study. Once in the bathroom, the girl said, looking at the Emperor, that she was starting. He nodded and prepared to watch. Valerie began to summon her ability, lighting the room in the usual blue colour. And while she summoned her abilities and showed what she could do, the Emperor just watched patiently, catching her every move. He looked thoughtfully at the crystals that Valerie created one by one. Creating different figures, she created not only a sphere and a cube, but also the face of a smiling Erlantz. Watching his sister, the Emperor thought that she herself said that she had the ability, but he did not think that it was so incredible. He told Valerie that there are no permanent secrets in this world, so he suggested that the girl use her power for good and something useful. The girl said that if so, she even had an idea of what they could do. She offered to make ice, sell it, and help the needy. The Emperor clearly thought about the proposal to create an ice business. He said they couldn't keep the ice temperature up and that was a problem, but having Valerie there would change things, that her ability will help avoid damage. The girl blushed with joy, clapping her hands and asking if they would really do as she suggested. She said that she would give the rest of the money to His Majesty. The Emperor asked in surprise if she meant him, and then with a laugh he stroked her hair and said that she didn't need to pay him, because she was at the age when she should get everything for free. With a smile, he told her to just accept his help and the fact that he supported her since her brother was still the richest man in the empire. He told her to keep the money for herself and donate it to charity. With a smile, Valerie felt her brother's hand again on her head, and he himself said that one day her good deeds would be her protection. Having finished the conversation with her brother, Valerie said with a smile that she would leave then so as not to distract him. As she made her way to the exit, a bracelet fell out of her pocket, rolling across the floor and catching the Emperor's attention. When he picked up the bracelet, a few of the girl then came off, and she clenched her teeth in embarrassment. He began to understand, even though he asked why the sister wore the bracelet in her pocket and not on her arm. And when she said that it was in case of escape, the Emperor cheerfully asked if it was money for her escape. The Emperor began to laugh, holding that bracelet in his hands. He said that everything in her room belonged to her, and she managed to take the simplest thing that was there. When Valerie blushed with shame, her half-brother laughed heartily, but now also at the fact that the girl turned red as a tomato. Wiping away his tears, he said that he really understands everything and will stop teasing her so she can go back, because Erlans is probably already waiting for her and she herself needs to calm down. Valerie bowed, telling His Majesty that she was grateful to him for today. With a smile, he thought of someone who would really be perfect for the job he had. The girl turned to leave the palace when one of the knights called out to her. Bowing and apologizing, he called himself Rex and said he was a knight. Valerie remembered one of the two guards smiling at her when she arrived and saying she was listening to Sir Rex. He awkwardly said that he thought his behaviour before had come across as offensive. Sir Rex bowed, saying that he had crossed the line, but he only wanted to cheer her up as she looked confused. Meanwhile, the knight bowed to the ground, saying that he begged for forgiveness and that he would gratefully accept the punishment if she chose to punish him. He said that he dared to insult a member of the royal family, and Valerie almost cried, saying that she was fine and that he just wanted to cheer her up. But Rex insisted that she punish him, because such is the relationship between master and knight. Valerie asked what he was saying. And when he began to say that this is what their captain says, to follow the Emperor's orders, Sir Bruno shouted at Rex, asking angrily what he was doing. Placing his hand on Rex's head, Bruno asked Her Majesty if his subordinate had said anything unnecessary, and she only smiled, glad to see Sir Bruno. Valerie said that Sir Rex came to her because he was worried and he was smiling widely as he looked at the princess. The girl thought Rex was cute as a puppy. Bruno told him that Rex, although young, was the second most skilled in the entire knightly order as he put his hand on his shoulder and smiled. He asked the princess to take care of her with a big smile, and Valerie smiled back just as big and told him to take care of her. He awkwardly thanked the princess for the praise, saying that he should become the best knight for Her Highness. Valerie stared at him with huge eyes, thinking to herself that it would be so nice if everyone treated her with the same kindness as Rex and Bruno. Matias Osvalio was the Emperor's half-brother and renounced the title of Archduke. He owned Mount Herne and was therefore the best option for ice production. Valerie sat in the living room with a pile of goodies and thought she had been called to meet Matias. Valerie, under the Emperor's smile, tried the cakes, which she had not even touched last time, and this time they were incredibly appetizing. The girl thought that Matias was the best person for the ice-making class, but she was worried if he would recognize her because he was there when Alicia poisoned his mother. She did not take her eyes off the door through which Matias entered. The brunette, dressed in all black and with a bored expression on his face, informed his brother that he had arrived. Valerie remembered him as completely different, a different hairstyle and love for completely different suits, as well as glasses. When Duke Osvalio sat down, she thought with surprise that he must not have noticed her because of the lack of glasses. He leaned back on the sofa and closed his eyes, saying that he could finally rest. When the Emperor said that it was brave of him, Matias opened his eyes in annoyance and said that it was not because of him and that he had been racing from another kingdom for 4 days without rest. After the words about his own appearance from his brother, the Emperor smiled and said that he still had jokes to make, but he said that he wanted him to go into business. Matias became visibly angry, asking if that was why his brother had called him, because this had never happened before. With a smile, the Emperor calmly said that he would definitely like it because this is an ice business. They began to joke with each other because Matias said that clearly 10 years have passed and now there are new technologies that he is not aware of. Hearing of the new method and improvement, Osvalio seriously asked why there was such a hurry. And then he widened his eyes when he heard another voice, a girl's, saying that this method suggested using her powers. Not believing his own ears that there was someone else in the room, Matias quickly grabbed his glasses and said that he would know for sure if there was someone else. Through the glass of his glasses, the Duke saw the girl, wondering if Valerie Belov could really see. Matias got angry in a second, poking a finger at her and asking his brother what she was doing here and what abilities she was talking about. The Emperor calmly said that they had arranged a meeting to get to know each other, and then, without taking his eyes off his brother, asked Valerie to show what she was capable of and told her to take on a different role. Matias did not take his eyes off the child while the girl readily asked what she should do. Hearing that she needed to keep the temperature of the ice the same for as long as possible, Duke Osvalio angrily asked what the two of them were talking about. The Emperor nodded, giving permission and telling his brother to see for himself. Valerie readily nodded in response. Matias was fascinated by the blue light and what Valerie was doing. She froze the water and kept the temperature of the ice. She stacked the frozen balls on a plate, keeping them at the same temperature so they wouldn't melt. She said that she had done as she was told, and that the ice would keep the temperature for a long time. The Emperor smiled as he took one of the small spheres that the girl had created. He said that this was enough and praised her. Matias, noticeably confused, said that it was really the power of ice, not fully believing what he saw. Completely bewildered, he sat down on the sofa and said that with such an ability, success was really assured to them and that he recognized. But then he angrily said that he would not have anything to do with the daughter of that terrible woman and that the Emperor would not laugh at him with his ideas of a joint business. He smiled a little guiltily and told his brother that he hadn't heard all the news yet because he was away. Valerie was visibly worried and pulled away, telling His Majesty that everything was fine and not to push too hard. And he just said with a smile that it was nothing to worry about and that the fun would soon begin. Matias rolled his eyes at his brother, hearing that Alicia had died some time ago. He did not understand what happened and how. The Emperor, saying that he would not repeat it twice, and that he would listen attentively, standing by Valerie's side, began to relate all that had happened during his absence. The girl watched in horror as all the dishes with goodies flew up when Matias slammed his fist on the table. Duke Osvalio was sobbing, babbling, and asking how much he could. Valerie, looking at the completely broken man, remembered her mother's words that Matias is so cold-blooded that if you hit him with a knife, you wouldn't see a drop of blood. While Matias was sobbing, the girl asked her brother if he knew from the beginning that this would happen. And he said with a smile that he does not look like that, but Matias is very sympathetic. Wiping away his tears, the Duke reached out to take the contract his brother gave him, finally ordering him to stop sobbing. While the men were busy, the girl thought about the fact that she was behaving like a small child again, and that's why the Emperor laughed so much. This made her blush. Matias agreed to the business, saying that this is what they would do, and he looked at Valerie. The Emperor asked if anything additional was needed. Surprised, he asked his brother why he had to leave Atera's palace so urgently, and what he would use it for. They agreed that he would suit Valeria, and that she would not be able to live in Erlance's palace forever. She gritted her teeth, feeling awkward, and said that they didn't have to do that. And Matias said, interrupting the girl and showing his boredom, so that she would take what was given. Valerie listened to what was bad in her palace, but she did not hear, because she only heard that Matias would visit her every time. She said she would accept the palace with gratitude. Her words even made Matias blush a little, although he tried to remain indifferent. She clenched her fists when she heard that the Emperor wanted to throw away everything in the Ronin palace, but she said that there was one thing that needed to be taken care of. Both brothers looked at her back with interest as the Emperor said that Valerie spoke of something precious, and he wondered what she would bring from that palace. And then he displeasedly told his brother that for his insolence he would work as a porter, and Matias accepted his fate. When he went outside, The Duke thought that the girl was small and certainly had not gone far, seeing her almost immediately outside the square in front of the palace. Matias watched, following Valerie as she came closer and closer to the Ronin palace where she lived. Looking around, the Duke thought about the fact that he had not been to this palace for 10 years. He leaned against the door and watched, wondering if it was possible to find anything in such a mess. When he saw exactly what Valerie was picking up from the floor, Matias's pupils almost popped out of his eyes in surprise. There was no way he was going to give that thing to that woman's daughter. The Emperor listened, holding his head, while his brother screamed, saying that he would not have helped at all if he had known that the Emperor would not give the casket to his wife. The Emperor said that he had no other intentions than to please the child, because she was just a girl, the same age as Erlonk. With tears in her eyes, Valerie picked up the casket from the floor and held it close to her. She was very sorry that she crashed. Matias gave his voice, sobbing and wishing for death with tears in his eyes. Valerie turned her head to him in surprise, asking the Duke if he had come too. With tears in his eyes, he came closer, asking if this was the precious thing she wanted to take. And then he said that it is dangerous for the child, because the casket is broken. Valerie replied that she would not throw it away anyway, but Matias told her to give it to him. This visibly surprised the girl. But she still decided to give the casket, although she was visibly upset about it. Matias asked Valerie if she would take anything else, but when she said no, he told them to go to Atera's palace now. When they were walking to the palace and Matias was in front, he told her that he hated her because she was the daughter of that woman. Without turning to her, he said that Alicia cared so much about her, her daughter, that he could not even think of anything good related to Valerie. When Matias returned, he looked guilty, saying that he believed what he saw but not what it really was, and that he hated an innocent man. And then Duke Osvalio bowed, asking forgiveness for hating and condemning her. He apologized profusely, saying that he was sorry that he had caused her so much harm and pain with his hatred. And then he straightened up, and handing Valeria the casket that he had asked her for before, said that he was apologizing by returning such a dear thing to her. Valerie looked silently at the Duke, who said that he would show her by his actions that he was sorry, and she would decide to forgive him or not. She had no words to say anything. And then she looked away from him, saying that if he was honest with her, then she would also be honest with him. She said that she understood the reasons and that there was nothing she could do, but she was really hurt. Placing her hand on her heart, the girl said that it was unfair, because she did not choose who she would be born. And then she smiled, looking at Matias with her huge eyes, and thanked him for apologizing first. Hearing that she believed in his sincerity and accepted his apology, Matias was visibly surprised, asking if it was really that simple. With a smile, she said that it was, because he himself had said that he would back up his words and said that she hoped he would keep his words. Matias began to say that he knew he was real trash after the girl called him brother. Valerie began to grab his arm, trying to draw attention to herself and convince him that he had not done anything. She gave him the glasses, saying that she had cut her hand and that it needed to be treated as soon as possible. Putting on his glasses, he said that the wound really needed to be treated quickly, so he suggested going to the palace as soon as possible. To Valerie's surprise, Matias picked her up and carried her into the palace so that she wouldn't go alone. She thought that rumours were definitely not to be trusted. One of the servants, seeing Matias, said that he had heard that he had gone to the kingdom of Garond and asked if he had returned. The servant girls were visibly happy to see Mr. Matias because, according to them, they had not seen him for a long time. Hanging on Matias's arm, Valerie looked at the maids and thought to herself that they had been looking after her brother for a very long time. And then she was even more embarrassed when she heard someone tell Matias that he was carrying the princess like that because she was not a thing. They began to ask, one after the other, whether the princess was comfortable, and that probably because of the expression on the Duke's face, she could not say anything against it. He embarrassedly replied that he used to wear erlants like that, and nothing like that happened. And Valerie, finding herself on two legs, blushed even more from the whole situation. Matias glanced at her and apologized if she was uncomfortable. The maids began to tell the princess that they were sorry for Mr. Matias's behaviour, because she must have been uncomfortable. But the girl raised her hands, saying that it was nothing, because it was only thanks to the Duke that she got here so quickly. One of the girls, with a sweet smile, handed Valerie a piece of candy, saying that she would like to give it to the princess if she didn't mind. Valerie was surprised and shocked that the maid offered her a handmade candy, and for the first time since they met. And later, when Valerie began to awkwardly stutter, the girl with a wide smile told the princess to call her Nella. They were both smiling, clearly in common, as Valerie agreed and addressed the maid by name. All the maids, noticing the cut on the girl's finger, became serious, asking who dared to do this. Pointing at the broken casket, where there were sharp parts, Matias said that they had misunderstood everything and that it was all because of the casket. Everyone cried out in embarrassment, saying that they thought someone could do this to the princess. Smiling widely, Valerie tried to hide the fact that she wondered if the servants were behaving this way because of Matias's presence. One of the governesses said that she would call the palace doctor because it would be a tragedy if a scar remained on the princess's finger. Putting his hand on Valeria's shoulder, Matias told them to go to the living room. At that time, the girl could not believe her own eyes and the warmth of the reception in this palace. The Duke said that Nella and Lector, the butler, would go with them, and that the others would return to their usual business. He returned displeased to the servants, who said that he had not been here for a long time and that he had sent them all away rather quickly, and then he said to serve snacks for him and Valerie later. Returning to those who remained in the corridor, the girl smiled sweetly and waved her hand, saying goodbye until the next meeting. Looking at this lovely sight, the three maids watched the princess with amazement. They discussed how she looked so much like that woman, but was so cute and had a completely different vibe. One of the governesses said that she could not believe that Matias was entrusted with the care of the youngest, because he had been so naughty when he was little. Valerie turned her head toward the entrance as the butler announced that the royal physician had arrived. She was visibly surprised, thinking that the palace doctor was too busy to come because of some cut, or that Canna would come. But there was a man standing in front of her, saying that he was Veldo Posit. Clutching the skirt of her dress, Valerie thought she was still a little uncomfortable with this doctor. She remembered lying with a fever and feeling very ill. A doctor was sitting by her bed. The same Veldo who had listened to her mother, who asked to lower her temperature and everything, because her moans were annoying her. She remembered looking at him feverishly, waiting for help, and he then asked himself why he should waste his time on a poor princess without an inheritance or connections. When the doctor asked if it wasn't Duke Osvalio, he just looked at him with his dark eyes, causing him to laugh awkwardly and say that through him you could see the future of the empire. Matias was visibly irritated by Veldo's rhetoric and sycophancy, having also heard about the emperor and his brilliance. He asked if he could stop flattering and look at the child's wound, to which the doctor smiled awkwardly. The doctor said that the Duke should be examined first, and then the princess, because there is a scratch on his precious body. Leaving Valerie behind, the doctor smiled and said that Her Highness's wounds could wait. Nella whispered to Lecter that Veldo had always been a shitty person, and wouldn't he go to hell right now? The lecturer said that there were now 2 palace doctors and hoped that the Duke would not be too angry. The next moment, the palace guards broke the doctor's arms, bringing him to his knees. He asked why the Duke was so suddenly ill with him. Matias asked if it was really sudden because the doctor ignored the princess's wounds, which is unacceptable. Veldo was drenched in sweat and asked in a trembling voice whether the Duke considered the princess a stick in his eye. Duke Osvalio gave him a murderous look, asking if he was really going to make excuses now, and asked if the title would disappear if he hated Valerie. He bowed his head, not knowing what to say to the fact that he was looking up at a member of the royal family. Matias, turning his head to the doctor, said that he was right and that he really hated Valerie, but as he could see for himself, everything had changed noticeably. The Duke said that was why he wouldn't allow anyone like Veldo to ignore the princess's presence. When they tried to take him out, Matias added that he would personally report this incident to the Emperor and that Veldo would await his punishment. The lecturer asked how such an improper and ill-mannered person could stay in the palace for so long. Nella said that if she had known this would happen, she would have asked for only medicine and nothing else. She was just standing there with a tray of medicine. Valerie said quietly that she was fine. Without looking at anyone in particular, she also said that she was already used to this attitude towards herself. Matias was so angry at her words it was really painful to hear. He sat opposite the girl and told her not to say such a thing, because it is not a normal attitude. Herzog said for the sister to tell him if there was anyone else who behaved like the doctor, and he would help her. She wouldn't have to fight it all by herself. While tending to the princess's wound, Matias said that he had noticed before that she was too thin and that she needed to eat more to gain weight, and she said that in recent days she is eating well and gaining weight. Matias carefully taped and wrapped Valerie's wound and fingers, saying he was done. The lecturer observed a rather cute scene where both the Duke and the princess blushed, she that he did and he that she thanked him. And when the lecturer noticed that the Duke had something on his cheek, he put his hand and said that it was empty and that he had hit himself. The lecturer asked if Duke Osvalio had really hit himself and if he himself could hear what he was saying. It was clear that he did not believe it. Reluctantly, he did admit that he was embarrassed, that he treated Valerie very badly, and that's why he punished himself. A broad smile blossomed on Lecter's face. They then discussed that Matias had done many things in the past that deserved punishment, and that Nella even feared for his future. And Lecter said that he was glad that the Duke had grown up. Matias rolled his eyes and said that this is how they treat him, because he is no longer their master, and that it is a bit sad. The lecturer asked what he meant. He asked with horror if the Duke had really said that they would have a change of master. He said with a smile that, as they could already see, their new mistress was Valerie, and that he had already spoken to his brother about it, and everything had already been decided. They looked fearfully at the Duke, who had promised to take them to the residence if he found out that they were treating Valerie badly. And then Nella and Lecter began to rejoice, saying that they had been very sad all 4 years that he was not in the palace, but now it will be joyful and merry here. With a big smile, Matias said that if anyone had heard them, they would have thought they were having a festival in the palace. On the day of the move, everyone was packing and tidying up while Valerie and Erland stood together. Rael said that Veldo Posit was caught for corruption and sent to prison, because that's the way it should be with people like him. And then, as if she had to speak, Rael said with a smile that she had dressed up the princess a little. In her new outfit and accessories, Valerie looked really cute looking at her governess. A little embarrassed, she said that today it was really necessary to greet everyone properly, while Erlantz chewed something in silence. Blushing, the Crown Prince said that she was not obliged to leave him and move to a new palace and leave him here. She touched his hair with a smile, saying that there is nothing you can do now and that the luggage is already packed. The boy insisted very much that she come to him every day. They both swore on their little fingers that they would come to each other every day. If one could not, the other would come. Matias appeared at the door of the room, saying that everything was already packed and it was time for them to go to Atera's palace. But when Erland said that he would also go, the Duke displeasedly reminded his nephew that he had lessons today. But he quickly gave up, saying that he had no time to argue, and allowed Erlantz to go with them. When they approached the palace, Matias covered Valeria's eyes with his palm, so that she would not see everything earlier than necessary, and the girl only turned to her brother in surprise. Leaning over to her, he said with a smile that they had already arrived, and that Valerie should look carefully. All the servants of the palace joyfully welcomed the princess upon her arrival, clapping their hands, scattering confetti, and simply being happy. Matias whispered that all this was done for her. The girl was visibly surprised, just looking around in amazement, as if seeing a holiday in her honour for the first time. Everyone, one by one and together, greeted Her Highness, saying that they were very glad of her arrival, and Erlantz, who liked such a holiday, was also happy. She thanked everyone, saying they had tried very hard, and Nella gave a thumbs up with a big smile and said it was too early to be surprised. Matias awkwardly asked what else, looking confused. The next moment, the chef rolled out a huge cake in honor of Valerie, smiling happily and satisfied with his masterpiece. Everyone discussed the cake, saying it was a masterpiece, and then asked if Valerie liked it. She just looked at him in amazement.